Morning everyone, hope you're well. Welcome to Lockdown Lessons Live. I'm Toby and today we're going to be looking at the way in which sound works in language. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention that my 12-year-old collie is a little busier than he normally is and the postman has not yet come. So if he does arrive, Duke will bark very, very loud and sound very frightening. Don't be alarmed. So today we're going to be looking at the way in which sound works in language, and specifically we're going to be looking at the sound of meaning. This all might sound a little strange, but it's a really important part of language, and today's lesson is all about recognizing how sound in language has meaning. So I'm a musician and fell in love with music first, perhaps before language really got to me. And one of the poets that I first started reading and first started really loving was Dylan Thomas. And I want to read you a little bit of a poem that he wrote many years ago. And I love Dylan Thomas because much of it doesn't make any sense. It sounds mad. He sounds like a complete loon, and just like in Becky's lesson yesterday, where sounds juxtapose each other, Dylan Thomas does that a great deal. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of a poem, and I just want to show you how mad language can sound. In the meantime, can you please write in the chat your favourite sounding word, providing it's not rude? So a word that you love saying and you love the way it sounds. And I'm just going to read a short bit of a poem by Dylan Thomas called Light Breaks Where No Sun Shines. Light breaks where no sun shines, where no sea runs. The waters of your heart push in their tides, and broken ghosts with glowworms in their heads. The things of light file through the flesh, where no flesh decks the bones. Light breaks on secret lots, on tips of thought where thoughts smell in the rain. When logics die, the secret of the soil grows through the eye and blood jumps in the sun. When I first read that, I thought it was mad. And reading it now, I still think it's mad, but I think it's a beautiful example of how writers can use sound to create new meaning. So sound means. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look at how language works. So we've talked about how language came about, but being that this is a sound lesson, we're going to focus really completely on that. So we have the thing itself. So right at the beginning of these sessions, we talked about the thing. In the first example, there was a snake, and how the snake, the word snake is not a snake at all. In fact, it's just a sound, and we have the thing itself. So the thing is the animal, then the oral word that is designed to somehow encapsulate that animal. So we talked about the S sound in snake. And then we have the written word. So that's the oral word decoded. And this is just an important thing to recognize in language, that language has gone through transformation from the thing to the sound that we use to represent the thing to the written word. So often I think the students that I think struggle with language and struggle with reading is making that connection between the written word and the spoken word and the thing itself is actually quite complicated. And it's quite complicated to hear the written word. And this lesson is really all about how we hear the written word. Okay, so today it's all about how we hear the written word. And I want you to use your ears and think about how things mean. And Chloe has already suggested bubble. So her word is bubble, and it's a lovely word. It is full of plosives, and it sounds absolutely like the thing itself. So there we've got that very direct relationship between the thing and the oral sound. We have bubble, and that sounds like the thing itself. You can almost hear the bubble pop. And again, pop, you can hear that onomatopoeic element. Now, it might sound like this is not relevant for the study of GCSE or A level or even degree level, but actually it absolutely is. And making the link between how language sounds and how it means is really imperative in our exploration of it. Today, as I said, we're going to be looking at how sound contributes to meaning, and we're going to be looking at some beautiful examples of amazing writing, particularly by the best writers that have ever lived. So we have our toolkit when we analyse language. So when we go to look at language, we look at the way in which it sounds, we look at the structure of words and text, and we look at the imagery. Much of the work that we've done so far has been on the metaphor. You remember that finding the impossible in language and going through those metaphoric steps that I've taught you. Today we're focusing specifically on sound, and we're going to look at, I think, the best writer that's ever lived, and that's William Shakespeare. So Shakespeare has a bit of a bad rep, and he is a writer that divides, I suppose. So many might say, well, Shakespeare's not relevant, or many might think that it's not, they don't understand it, or it's too confusing, and the language is too archaic. But actually, there's lots of different ways around that. But fundamental to our understanding of Shakespeare is how we hear it. Remembering, of course, that Shakespeare's plays were meant to be seen and heard. So if we think back to that little diagram I showed you right at the beginning, how language has gone through that transformation, the thing, then it's gone to the oral word, and then it's gone to the written word, and then we take it out of its context where it's supposed to be put on a stage, and we start trying to read it, it becomes really confusing. So hopefully today we'll do something to address our confusion. And I want to give you some terminology. So just like yesterday, if you've got your notes handy, please have them to hand, as I've just said, and write down the following plosive. So the following word plosives here in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So plosives are the sounds that are P, B, D and T. And the letter sounds P, B, D and T, I should say. And they're formed through cutting off the air and expelling it and releasing it. So for the P and the B, which is both voiced and unvoiced, so the unvoiced plosive P, P, and the voiced plosive B, B. If you think about how that sound is created, air is filling your mouth, you're shutting your lips, and then you're releasing the air and the sound, P and B. D, the D plosive, works in very much the same way, although you're not shutting off your lips. You are, but you are stopping the air release from your mouth. Please, if no one's watching, you can try this at home. D, and the same for T. So both voiced and unvoiced, the unvoiced T and the voiced D. So in your mouth, you should feel that the sound is being stopped and then released. And this sound in our language is the plosive. And it's really important. Plosives, like Chloe's bubble, can be playful. They can be jolly and they can be fun. So here we've got the PBDT letter sounds, and then we've got playful, fun, dangerous, and forceful. Just want to look at those last two, that plosives can imply danger and force. So if we take words like damage, even in the word dangerous, you can see that plosive at the beginning of the word. And when plosives are used in language, they're used to convey either playful or fun things like Chloe's bubble, or things that are dangerous and forceful. If you think about when you might have been angry or cross, you might utilize language that employs plosives to really exaggerate and stress how things mean. So the plosive sound means fun or playful things, but it could also mean danger and force. And that's interesting and important because ultimately, just like the word snake, plosives are used in particular words to imitate things. If you think about the movement of the air through the mouth and arrested and stopped by the lips or the teeth and the tongue, and then released, that action is actually quite dynamic and powerful. And it's no surprise that when writers want to convey power or force, or we do in our everyday speech, that we start using plosives. So I suppose one of the first things I'd like to do is think about that in your day-to-day use of language, and think about where you might use and stress plosives, because they're having an effect. They're fun, playful, or they're forceful and dramatic, and above all, they imitate, they copy, they express force. So that's the plosive. And next up, the vowel. So vowels are really, really interesting. They are, of course, the letter sounds A, E, I, O, U, but of course they appear almost in every word, but not every word has the same length, and the length is often, well, it can be, as I am stressing different lengths of words, but we naturally elongate the sound of vowels in particular words. So for instance, take the word mast, so M-A-S-T, but that A is elongated and is stretching. And that is significant for the word mast because masts are often tall. So the elongated R imitates the thing and stresses that thing is tall. So right at the beginning, I said that language goes through this transition. It goes from the thing to the oral word and then to the written word, but we're just focusing on the oral word today. So we're looking at the way in which language means and the way in which sound means specifically in language today. And plosives are playful and violent and forceful, and vowels stretch and emphasize. So there we've got the vowels. So if you can take a note of this, of course, these videos are going to remain on YouTube. So please, if you haven't got a pen and paper, you can come back and refer to this stuff. Evie's just said here that in arguments they can be very powerful. That's a really excellent point, Evie. Plosives can be powerful in language. Vowels also can be powerful in language when we stretch and emphasize how we're feeling using elongated vowels. So the vowels here, we've got A, E, I, O, U, these sounds. Sometimes in language these are joined together. They stretch, soothe, emphasize, but they also can imitate. And today's lesson, I want to talk about that, the way in which language imitates, and the way in which sound imitates. And I'm a true believer in this. And I suppose when the penny dropped for me, when I started analysing language and when I started teaching it, was that if we can understand that language is trying to imitate the world, when we write about it, we'll be able to talk about how that has an effect, an impact on the text that it appears in. So let's have a look at those vowels. Oh, whoops. So you can see towards the left, we've got those gentle and soft meanings of vowels. They stretch, they soothe, they emphasise. So that word mast stretches and soothes and emphasises. But vowels in words often imitate things like shock and pain and uncertainty. So I can't hear you, you can hear me. So I'm just going to run through those and give you a demonstration. So shock, there's my shock. Utilising, I hadn't prepared doing this, but I'm doing it anyway. So that shock, utilising vowels and only vowels. Pain, utilising the vowels again. Joy, woo. Perhaps I should have prepared this. Woo, for joy. And then we have the uncertainty. Now, of course, with those sounds, I'm not using those in words, but writers are amazing. Great writers are amazing, and they use words to give that impression of in terms of their use of vowels. They give that impression of pain, give that impression of joy, or even uncertainty by using particular words. So when you hear language, and it's really central that you listen when you read, and you can hear and pick up the mood, the feeling, the emotion. It's quite a primal thing that I'm requesting for you to do today, but it's really, really important. Think about how vowels, vowel sounds, and today specifically the plosive sounds, create meaning. So today, rather dangerously, we're going to look at Shakespeare. And specifically, we're going to look at Macbeth. It might be that you're not studying Macbeth, you might be studying A Midsummer Night's Dream or Romeo and Juliet. But I recognise already your trepidation, your worry about it. It's archaic language, it doesn't seem to make sense. And that's okay. Today, it doesn't need to make sense because we're only analysing the sound. So we're picking up Macbeth. So Macbeth is a tragedy, and it's about a man who kills the king and who eventually gets defeated. So it's a very short synopsis. And we're joining Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 7. At the point he's uncertain as to whether to go through with the murder of King Duncan. He's been given information from supernatural sources that he will one day be king, and his wife is, well, pushing him into it a bit. He's a warrior, so he's killed people before, but really, you don't need to know any more than that. I'm going to read a soliloquy. I'm going to stick it on the screen here as well, but remember, I want you to listen to it. Okay, we read with our ears. So I'd like you to think about what words stand out, specifically what vowels and plosives stand out, and I'd like to write those in the chat, and we're going to explore them together after I've read this. Think about how it sounds. What are the plosives doing? What are the vowels doing? So we're joining Macbeth, and he is not sure what to do, and he's thinking about the murder of King Duncan. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. But in these cases, we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught, return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife itself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity, like a newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which overleaps itself and falls on the other. So there's Macbeth thinking about whether he should kill the king, and in that, it seems to me, towards the end of that speech, that soliloquy, that speech to himself, that he's decided perhaps to not do it. So I'll leave this on the screen just for a second and write down what words utilise vowels and plosives, and what words do you think are important. And while you do that, I'm just going to talk a little bit again about the way in which sound means. So sound has meaning, and language is made up of sound, and we use sound and sound patterns to represent things, and these things that we represent in sound are meant to imitate. Sounds are meant to imitate and give us an impression of mood. Here, Chloe has written blow, bloody, bear, plead, and pity. Now, these all sound quite forceful. They sound forceful, and it's not surprising. Macbeth is considering whether to kill the king or not, to commit murder that's completely immoral. It's no surprise that these violent sounds are appearing in his speech. What about vowels? Can you have another look? See if there are words that utilise vowels. So remember, these are words, these are sounds that stretch through the emphasise, but there's shock, pain and joy. Have a look in the soliloquy again and see if you can find words that emphasise, words that stretch and that utilise that vowel. So, as Chloe pointed out there, we've got those plosives that imitate force, which isn't a surprise because Macbeth is committing murder, or about to, but also those vowels that might convey uncertainty or fear. There's that word fear with those elongated vowels. We've got plead here. That's good, Chloe. Plead is an elongated vowel. So what we're going to do is we're going to look specifically at a chunk of the extract. Evie said, he sounds almost sad and maybe fearful. Yeah, I totally agree. He does sound fearful and sad. My question, which we're sort of going to work towards, is what's he deciding to do? Can you hear in the sound of the language that he's using what his decision is? Are the plosives winning? Is the force winning, or is the uncertainty winning. And that really is the game. So let's have a look at a little bit I've taken out of the extract. So yeah, Evie, you've said he doesn't seem to want to kill the king, and a lot of the words feel maybe forced. Yeah, that's interesting because, of course, Macbeth is being forced. He's being forced really by his wife. It's really interesting that as human beings we pick up on the sound of things. It's quite a primal instinct, but it has meaning, and we shouldn't ignore it. We shouldn't just focus on the words in front of us, but rather think about how they sound. So here we jump the life to come. This is at the beginning. But in these cases, we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor. So we've got those dynamic plosives of bloody. We've got the plosives in plague. So these are forceful words. But what's winning here? In these cases, we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. To my mind, those vowels are winning a bit. So let's have another look at another bit. So I'll read it and see if you can write down in that chat where the vowels are being elongated and where those plosives are being used to force. Not bear the knife myself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off. What do you reckon? Which of those words have those plosives in? Can you write in the chat? Which has force and impact? Okay, let's take a sip of water there. So here we're looking for, there we go, Chloe, thank you. So we've got besides, plead, deep. So these words are full of that forceful plosive. That's my printer in the background, forgive me. But equally, they have that forceful plosive, but they're also utilising that vowel in the middle. All of these words, besides, plead, and deep. And remembering that when it comes to vowels, they suggest an uncertainty. Excuse me, I don't know why my printer's cleaning itself. Excuse me again. Uncertainty, fear, and pain. So here it might be we're hearing Macbeth in pain. In pain because of a decision that is complicated, a decision that is immoral. He's afraid of his wife. He's afraid of what she might do. There's a real power dynamic between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. So we've got the force there, bear, born, besides, plead, deep, damnation. We've got those words, but we've also got these vowels that are really stressing, I think, those things, that pain, that uncertainty, that fear. So language is designed with sound. It's really important that we recognise that when somebody saw that first snake, they did not take their pen and pencil, and a pad and start trying to draw the word. Rather, the sound came from the thing itself. That sibilant S, that harsh consonant K. And the same is true of plosives and elongated vowels. Plosives imitate a force and a strength, and vowels imitate a fear sometimes and an uncertainty. And I think what's remarkable about this remarkable about this particular speech in Shakespeare is that I think that Shakespeare's showing us that. He wants us to hear the pain of Macbeth and the uncertainty rather, and he wants us to hear that perhaps more pronounced than the force and drama. What's winning, I think, in this speech is Macbeth's uncertainty. Of course, the play is a tragedy, and soon, just after this speech, we have Lady Macbeth that rolls in, and she starts interrogating him and asking him questions, and ultimately, our the anti-hero Macbeth does go on and kill King Duncan. So we'll look at the last part of the speech, and I've chosen this for a couple of reasons. Because what we're going to do is we're going to run through the triangle, and I'll try and do this as frequently as possible so you can see how to give really deep and evaluated analysis and really increase your ability to write about English, and which will ultimately increase your grade if that's what you're after. It's a technique, as I've said many times before, that really enabled the students that I've taught in the past to get their grades, and I've seen students use this and get the grade 9, seen them use it and get the A star at A level, seen them use it and really smash the grade 5 and grade 6 at GCSE. So it's a really useful tool, and one that you can use to improve your grade in English. So we're going to look at this bit. This is the last bit of the soliloquy. And he says, at the end, Macbeth, he says, "I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition which overleaps itself and falls on the other." So here, I'm sure you can see the impossible. If you can you write it in the chat? I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent. So spur is something that horsemen used to wear and perhaps still do in some circles. And with a spur, you kick it into a horse. I don't know why I'm showing you me using my leg, but you kick it into a horse, and the horse goes quicker. It's a really cruel torture in many regards. So, but he says he has no spur to prick the sides of his intent. So his ambition. He doesn't have a... yeah, thank you, Eva. Yeah, you've said it perfectly. I have no spur. So he doesn't have the motivation to go through with it. Yeah, fantastic, Eva. They do make a horse go forward. So that's the first thing. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent. So remember, we separate the real from the unreal. Lovely, Evie. He's saying he can no longer go on. That's absolutely right. There are a couple of metaphors here. He says, but only vaulting ambition. So vaulting ambition, that's, I won't try and imitate it here, although I seem to be already. I don't know why. Vaulting, when the pole vaulters vault over a very high pole. And so ambition is vaulting. Well, that's a metaphor. Ambition doesn't vault itself. What else have we got? Where are the other bits of metaphor? The last bit, falls on the other, is an extended part of that vaulting metaphor. So let's focus on I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent. I have no motivation, so let's focus on spur. So what is a spur? It makes the horse go faster. What else is a spur? Have a think. A spur is a form of torture. Jockeys use crops or short whips when they're racing, but it's different to a spur. A spur in westerns is either a sort of like a spinning ninja disc, which is serrated on the edges, but you do have spurs that are sharp and pointed. So these are instruments of torture. What else can we say about spur? Instruments of torture, an incentive to do something. Yeah. So spur could be an incentive to do something. That's very good. Well done, Mike. something that is spiked and something that is sharp. Those two are really good. So let's just take those two. We've got painful as well. So spiked, it's sharp, it's painful. And so we'll take those and we'll draw our conclusions. So it could suggest that Macbeth isn't sharp enough. At this point, I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent. I don't have the sharpness. I don't have the evil, maybe you could say. I don't have the forcefulness to go through with this action. I can't take the pain to go through with this action. So there, analysing the extract, we could say that this metaphor shows that at this point, Macbeth doesn't have the desire to go through with the action, the incentive. He doesn't have the sharpness. He cannot commit to giving that much pain or even feeling that pain on his own. Here, Evie said, it makes you go forwards even if you don't want to. So he doesn't have the incentive to do that. He is resisting. So it's lovely, quick metaphor. I've surprised that metaphor analysis on you, but yeah, lovely. So we've said all those things about the metaphor. Now we look at the shape of the language. So we've got most of these words. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition. So vaulting ambition is polysyllabic and complicated, but most of the other, apart from overleaps, most of the other are all monosyllabic. So these suggest a bluntness, a resistance, a refusal. And he's also saying things simply. He's in his speech, his soliloquy, which is basically his thoughts, his private thoughts. He is saying that he is resisting this idea. He's come to the conclusion, and it's simple. He doesn't have the spur to prick the sides of his intent. He doesn't have the desire to inflict pain, to go through such a spiked and sharp activity. And we can prove this, and this is where language really starts becoming fascinating, because in the sound of the vowels, you can see they're winning. And how you'd write about that, as you say, throughout. If you look at all the vowels here, so we've got vowels and tears and drown, elongated vowels and spur. We have overleaps and falls. So I would say, if I was analysing this in terms of the vowels, that whilst there are those forceful plosives, they seem to be, and I might use a metaphor here, overshadowed by Shakespeare's employment of vowels, which seem to stress the pain and the fear, but above all, the uncertainty in Macbeth's position. Now, it might feel at the end of our lesson that putting all those things together is super, super complicated. Yeah, so we've got a couple of things here. So vowels are more sad and sorry. They certainly are. And that's really important because Macbeth is somebody that we end up sympathising with up until this point, probably. And we see his being torn between this horrible act and something other. And he does go on to commit this awful murder. But it's scenes like this which give us that sense of pity for him. And we can see that he is uncertain about committing such a grievous act. And we hear it. We hear his uncertainty, we hear his pain, and we hear his fear. And that's no accident. Shakespeare's done that on purpose. So today's lesson's been all about sound and all about the way it works. And what I'd like to... Yeah, there he is. I'm very sorry. just 2 seconds. Juke, juke, here, here. As you can see, I've trained him very well. Not well enough. Okay, Duke. Okay, done. So, to finish up, thank you very much. I'll be speaking to you later about that. So, Shakespeare wants us to hear, just like Duke wants us to hear. And there is that force and aggression in Duke's bark, which has meaning. He's warning me. So, sound has meaning. Our animal language is much more advanced than Duke's. But when you listen to complicated language, when you listen to Shakespeare, you read it, read with your ears, and listen to how those meanings are being conveyed. So we're going to be here throughout lockdown. We want to, we're very pleased with those of you that have sent right on cue. Thanks, Evie. So, we want to give as many resources as we can to you, and we're staying until the end of lockdown, absolutely. You can follow us on Facebook. Please share what we're doing with your friends, if your friends might require some English lessons, which they otherwise couldn't access. So you can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Crowdfunder. So we've been crowdfunding for our lockdown lessons live, and we've almost reached our target, which is really fantastic. And of course, you can like and subscribe on YouTube. So I hope you're safe and well wherever you are. We're going to come back on Tuesday of next week with more of the same, and with any luck, some different subjects next week. I hope you take care and look after yourselves, and we'll see you soon. Okay, all the best. Bye.